Hello, arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I am your host this evening. And as you can see, we have a guest. Everybody, I want you please to welcome Cameron Barker, Liquitex's teaching artist, here with me today.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here.
I'm so excited for the show that we have planned for everybody watching. It's going to be so much fun. But before we do jump into that, I wanted to remind you guys that if you are interested in any of the products we are going to be showing or going over today, make sure to go to the website JerrysArtarama.com and type in today's class code, which is JL352. So if you type that in the search bar at the top of the website, the teacher's cart should come up and show you all this wonderful art supplies that we're going to be playing with. So officially, I'm going to hand off the show to you, and let's see what we're working with today.
Well, thank you so much, Emmy. It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Jerry's. Thank you so much, Liquitex, for having me. My name is Cameron Barker, Cam for short. I'm a Liquitex teaching artist, so I just get to play with Liquitex materials all day, every day, which is kind of the best.
So jealous.
And we are introducing a new version of something that you might recognize, right? So we are introducing Liquitex Heavy Body Bio Based Acrylics.
Yes.
And which is a very exciting thing. I'm really stoked.
And I'm sure everybody watching is going to have a million questions just like I do. So if you do have questions, make sure you pop them in the chats. Our amazing moderators are going to be asking them live while we're on the show today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think even just to get us started, what does bio-based even mean?
Very, very good question.
So if you are familiar with Liquitex and our heavy body series, you are familiar with acrylics, which are made up of three parts, right? All paints are. You have your vehicle, you have your pigment, and you have your binder. So acrylics have a binder of a petrol base, which makes up an acrylic resin, right? And petrol comes from the earth, right?
Yep.
It comes from oil, it's fossil fuels, and it's not sustainable, right?
No.
It's not a renewable source. So at Liquitex, they were thinking, all right, how do we keep up the standard of acrylics? How do we make sure we also have a material that will work with your acrylics and your acrylic palette that you've already established at home? And then have something that's a little bit more sustainably sourced, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about bio-based, we're talking about an average of 50% more, average of 50% bio-based material in that acrylic resin that we were talking about. Okay. So bio-based, we're talking about corn, soy, agricultural refuse, and also food processing refuse, which is really kind of fabulous. So there's 50% of that in the resin, and as well as the petrol. So it's kind of cutting out half of the petroleum base, which is really, I think, kind of fabulous.
Yeah, no, it really is. And as we were talking about this earlier, I've used paints that actually were 100% recycled and are in the kind of sustainable kind of bio-based things. And honestly, I have not been impressed with any of them. And I am so excited for this. It's not 100% there yet, but it's getting that closer. And I think that having that level of sustainability in there is really going to move us closer to that goal. And playing with these paints has been an absolute dream. So I'm so excited for you guys to get to try these out as well.
Exactly. And I think that 50%, I think some people get a little stuck on the number. I got a little stuck on the number. I was like, well, why isn't it 100%? And really what we want to make sure of is that this is an addition to your acrylic palette. That we have something that you can continue to work with your palette. You can continue to work with other acrylics as well. You know, obviously all acrylics will be compatible with each other. And so we wanted to make sure we had something that wasn't just buy a whole new series of something, try to get something that doesn't necessarily even resemble acrylic or isn't exactly like acrylic.
That was my problem with the other paints that I had tried. They don't feel like acrylics.
Right, and these are, you can't distinguish them, right? For my practice painting of this, I was working with both bio-base and just the typical heavy body, and I kind of forgot which ones were which, because they're really just exactly the same, they work the same. It's really kind of an exciting thing that we can have a more sustainable practice. We can continue to build up that number as well, but at the same time, it's kind of like I don't know, the hybrid car of acrylic paints, if you will.
Yes, I think that's the best way to describe it. I love it.
Like, it's not going full electric,
yeah,
but we're still working with the convenience. We're still working with what we have, right? And about at the same time, we're making sure that we're having a really sustainable and high quality product. All of these products are also light fast. They are at the same durability. They are more non-cracking. They're at the same level as all the rest of the acrylic line, but they're just a little more sustainable, which is fabulous.
That's right. Yeah. All right, now do we have a quick question?
I think you sort of just answered it, but right off of the bat, we have 2 questions. Does it expire, and is it archival?
So does it expire? Expire is kind of like a food-based word, so everything has an expiration. I would say that what you really want to make sure of is that you keep it in a temperature-regulated space, right? So for all our materials, especially paints, when you're dealing with something that's like really high temperatures or the moisture level changes all the time, you're going to start, things are going to get a little iffy.
Or even if it's like really, really cold out. Like I know on occasion, you know, whenever it gets to winter time and we're getting closer to moving towards that right now, there are moments where, you know, if your paint is getting shipped to you and it's sitting on your front porch step and that front porch step is covered in snow, your acrylics are going to have some problems because it's just that weird temperature shift that can affect your paints over time.
Exactly, because you're expanding and then you're contracting, and it really does kind of mess up that compound stability that you really need for that acrylic resin, right? So yes, it expires, but if you keep it in like your house and you keep the lids on, which all of this packaging is recycled and recyclable. I use these, I don't recycle them, I just reuse them. What's kind of fabulous about something like this. Not for food. Not for food. We're using it specifically for paints, right? Or like your sewing objects or your
my trinkets.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say your bib bobs, but I don't think that's a thing.
I'm now gonna start calling it bib bobs. 100%. That is the word of the day.
Exactly. Love it. If you take anything from this, it's bib bobs. Yes. So I've already started my canvas here, and when Jerry's invited me to do a demo, we were kind of like, well, there's nothing different about the way that these heavy body acrylics work than with your other typical heavy body acrylics. So really, we're like, you know what? We're going to give you a demo to show you how synonymous these bio-based acrylics are with any other acrylic. So we're playing around with contrast today, and specifically temperature contrast, but also with surface contrast. So what I mean by surface contrast is that I have added, for this, I've added 2 parts of our stunning bio-based matte gel here, matte gel medium, and then I've mixed it with a black and a blue. So I've created it almost a black blue. These guys right here. Oh, thank you so much, Emmy, Vanna White. We're obsessed.
Right there. There we go.
Mix those together, and what's kind of great, especially about the mediums, these are also bio-based, so they are 50% with our bio-based materials, and then 50% with the petroleum, which is really exciting.
Yes.
That it allows for a little bit more of a flat application, so having it for a background is awesome. But also, because acrylics are typically a little bit more glossy, when you have the matte medium for a really dark surface or a really dark background, it allows for you to have more of an atmosphere. So it allows for what you're painting on top of it to come further forward and your background to fall further back. And so what I'll show you is if we go here, I'm going to turn us around a little bit. Fab. Oh, we can still see. And so I've essentially mixed the same colors here. So I've mixed my black, my blue, my red, and kind of mixed them together. I'm just starting to add in my reds as we go. So we're going from cool tones, so our blues and our blacks, into warm tones. So we're getting lighter and we're getting warmer. And so I'm looking at my reference here, and you're going to be like, Cam, this is really just kind of black on black. But because we have that surface contrast happening, when this dries, you will have just a sheen that shows into the shadows. So it kind of offers, you can kind of even see it here already, just that it gives it a slight shift. So when we get into these lighter moments here, they have the physicality, but then your shadows have a complexity to them too that's really beautiful. And you have that gloss with then on top of your matte medium.
Yeah. So I know right now it is wet.
Yes.
But yeah, even when it dries, because you've added that matte medium there, that is just going to have that. I love when people play with the surface quality.
Yeah.
It is one of those things where I feel like I don't see it often enough, and it just makes me so giddy.
And a lot of times, like, what will happen is people are trying to avoid certain qualities of paint opposed to like, really celebrating them. And I think because we live in a world where we share art through digital photography, sometimes it's great when you're working with a dark surface too to have your matte medium.
Oh, for sure.
Because then you have something that allows for us to not be so glaring. You don't have your flash. You don't have your ring light glare happening. You can see even see here. There's a lot of lights in the studio right now, and this is like it's just like a void, right?
It's
it
like
really
a black
is
hole
so
on the camera.
nice.
So when you are photographing,
I love photographing.
Yes, when you photograph your artwork, having that matte surface really does help, because I can't tell you how many times I have struggled to just try and get a photo of my work where I have to stand above it with like a thing over top of my head and I'm balancing it while trying to just snap a photo. It is the most ridiculous thing sometimes. I mean, we do as artists, we do some crazy things for our artwork, but having that matte surface, and like, again, though, with the juxtaposition, having that little bit of glare is really going to make that pop, and I really love that. Now, do we have a question?
Yes. The paints that you've shown so far in the jars, do those also come in tubes?
They don't come in tubes. So what's kind of nice about the Bio Base is that these jars are fully recycled and recyclable. So we were really focusing on Liquitex. I guess I didn't have any part of the developing. I just got to play with them. But
You are the demo artist. We're going to say we.
That's right, we. So Liquitex was really thinking about sustainability here, right? And so these jars help because that way you can also get every little ounce of paint in that jar, right?
Oh,
you
for
could
sure.
you could scrape right on in there and get to the very bare bones. Whereas with the tubes, it didn't necessarily allow for that to happen as much.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted the packaging to share the message of the product here.
And what I was just showing is we have the smaller jars of 75 milliliters. These, I'm going to pop it onto the screen just on the side here.
Awesome.
But then we also have the 500 milliliter. And I mean, you can just see this is an 8 by 10 canvas, and in comparison, just like the sheer quantity that you could get in this, and it's a really highly based or a highly pigmented paint. So you know that giant jar will really go quite a long way.
Yeah, and I know quite a few artists as well who they want to be able to mix their own paints in high quantities. So I think what's really great about the jars, of course the tubes are awesome, but what I love about these jars is that let's say that I want a huge quantity of this blue black. It's not sold, right? So what I can do is I could use a little bit of black and then add some of the blue in, and then just like you would with any of the pre-mixed colors, you're allowed to then have your own personalized color that stays within its jar that is meant to be able to have your paint stay for a long period of time. So I think if anything, the jars are a real benefit here, and you can add in your other heavy body acrylics into these jars.
Oh, for sure.
So it's definitely not necessarily like, I want you to go out and replace all of your acrylics. What I think that this is for is to be able to have just, it's adding some more sustainability into your acrylic practice, right? And I think that the jars and the packaging themselves really help out with that.
Oh, for sure. I love being able to reuse little jars like that.
Me too.
Like you said, the custom mixes definitely are one that I use that all the time for. And even if I do, like you were saying with this background, if you create that color and you want to bring that sheen down and you want to mix in the medium, you could have that be a pre-mixed thing as well.
Exactly.
So you could have like your background color for your series of paintings already pre-mixed and ready to go in a giant 500 milliliter jar, and then you can just reach for that every time.
Yeah, and sometimes you mix a color that you're like, that's not what I was going for, but that's gorgeous, right? And then say, I wish I had something to put that in.
I do that every
These
time.
bad boys, perfect for.
Yes. Now, one thing I did want to make sure to let everybody know, the surface you're actually working on is also a sustainable surface. So we have the recycled, I don't want to actually cover this up while you are painting.
No, cover it up.
We have the Liquitex recycled canvas, and it's made from, there's a bug, I'm sorry. Of course. It's made from, this one in particular has 3 little plastic bottles that it was made out of, which is the coolest thing ever.
Absolutely. And I think just like knowing what to do with the plastic in our world and see how we can work around what's in existence, continue research and development so that we can continue to think about, okay, what are more sustainable options? What are things that we can do in our practice as painters, as artists, to think about, okay, like how do I do little things at a time to help me grow whatever else? It's also really wonderful because for this collection at this point, there are no animal byproducts within these as well, right? So you'll notice that like the lamp black replaces the bone black, right? And so I think
I think down here somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere we have one where, then there are so many different blacks, which is really exciting, but it's also just good to know for like those of us who are vegan or, you know, just don't necessarily want that in our materials, whatever that might be. It's really exciting to know that like all of these materials are good for you to go if that's not something that you want.
I do love that.
And it's available for you if it is, right? I think bone black is a really exciting pigment to have.
Yeah. And I will say what I do love about all of these products is that you are not compromising the quality whatsoever. Like the viscosity of the paint, even though it is a heavy body paint, you're very easily being able to brush it onto this canvas in a very thin, kind of minimalistic way. Now, if you wanted to build up those textures, you could absolutely do that too, without any kind of issue with it being functional for your art practice.
Exactly. Yeah, beautifully said. Isn't that gorgeous?
I got very distracted by the color that you just mixed. It's so pretty.
So what we're doing now is we are just continuing to add in those warmer tones, right? Because we have, especially in the photo reference, you can see sometimes our photos, especially with digital photography, colors can feel really flat. So I think this is a really exciting way. And this is my hand. I love them. My mother gave them to me. Thank you so much. But also noticing that like despite whatever skin tone, whatever else you might have, thinking about, okay, like what is the quote unquote local color, which typically exists in here, and then thinking about how that applies to your painting, right? So we're going a little bit more exaggerated than this just because this is kind of like desaturated. I want a little bit more gusto in the skin tone I'm working for here. So we're going in, like we have this really beautiful purple that would be in here if that camera didn't flatten everybody out, right? So we're just kind of allowing for us to have a little bit more of like a painterly excitement in our palette.
Now, this purple that you did mix, that was the existing blue-black that you had on your brush.
Exactly.
With it's the quinacridone crimson, right? And it was just that.
Just that, yeah, exactly. And there's the black and there's the blue on my brush. I don't want to wash my brush until I have to, because I just love that there's a unity in the color just by the vehicle that you're carrying it with, right? And I know that you're looking at this and it's a little bit like, wait, can I see it? And you can kind of see it. There's a little bit. Yeah, I'll keep on going a little faster so that way we can get to the juicier part for the camera. And when you're painting too, you'll kind of notice like, ooh, am I in the right direction? The answer is probably yes. And if I do have that question, go back to your organization, right? You'll have kind of your deepest shadow, you'll have like a secondary shadow, you'll have your midpoint, which is that boundary in here, and then we'll have 2 lighter tones. So if you feel like there's... Exactly.
Sorry, that, it was a bit off camera.
What's called a terminator line, right through here and here, which distinguishes our shadow from our highlight. So that color will kind of like push us into the warms, and that's maybe where we'll wash our brush. We'll see.
Which I think that would make sense, because like the shadow realm of your object that you're painting, whether it be your hand or an apple or anything where it may be, I feel like the shadow realms always tend to be pretty cool and have those deeper tones, where when you start going into the other realm of the light kind of side of everything, I like that it makes sense that you would wash your brush when you start doing that transition.
Exactly.
But,
yeah, and just kind of like knowing like what's in your brush, what material you already have. I'm also like, by my own trade, I'm much more of a drawer slash renderer than I am a painter. So I think that kind of paint application is very much in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who just loves like a goopy paint moment, then feel free to kind of like use what we're talking about in your own application of paint.
I might be a goopy paint moment. That might be me. I have my moments where I meticulously render, but I also get a little wild with my paint.
And we can still be friends, you know?
Absolutely.
Celebrate differences here.
Now, do we have another question?
Yes, Nola is wondering if there's a specific medium you recommend to delay drying and extend blending time.
Yeah, so a medium that I would say, there are some like retardants that work with, and they don't have them in the bio-based yet, right? So what's nice about this too is knowing that any of our mediums, and really any acrylic mediums, but especially your Liquitex mediums, you can use them. So if you have a favorite that will slow down the drying time within your own acrylic practice, that will work here, just as they would if you were working with typical acrylic.
And for anybody who is wondering, this is the matte gel. It does also come in gloss as well, if that's something that you're looking for. Because I know that the paint sheen alone, when it comes to these, the heavy body acrylics, it tends to be kind of satin on its own. So if you want to up that gloss level, you could do that with that medium. And then bringing it back down with the matte would also be an option for you guys out there.
Exactly.
Which is also really fun when you get it really glossy on a super flat matte surface.
Yeah, for sure. And so you can kind of see we're just mixing to get warmer. This got a little bit too neutral for me, so we're probably going to like take a step here and here.
Okay.
But it's good to kind of know that like, okay, you know what? Sometimes we take a turn and we're just going to go here and here. Maybe this can be added a little later, but we'll see. I got carried away.
That's okay. That is the beauty of mixing on a palette and being able to kind of judge your colors before you apply it. Although I'm a very reactionary painter. It's like I'll mix something and I'm just like, boom, and I slap it onto my painting. I'm like, oh, that's wrong. And then I go back to my palette and mix something else in there and figure out, oh, that's either too blue or it's too yellow, and then I kind of adjust it the other direction and then I slap it onto my canvas and it's keep going that direction.
And I love that for you, and that will definitely happen here. I am not that way. I am like, oh, do. As you can tell,
very meticulous.
I'm a dabbler. I'm a little bit of a slower
okay.
burn here, but
no, see, I love how everybody works in such a different way, and it's getting your own voice into your painting, and it's just there's no wrong way of painting, which I love. Now I am curious. Is that coming across on the canvas right now that you guys can see that shift starting to happen? Because I was like, it's really hard because we have our screens in front of us where I can see it and it still looks like a black void to me. Yeah. And I'm like, as long as the cameras are picking it up, I just want to make sure.
Yes, and what's kind of great is that we have now created a really exciting developed shadow, right? I think what the difference between here and here is that this is flat. Right? This is so dynamic. So when we shift into what's happening in the highlights, which will happen right now, we're going to get something that's really exciting. So let me show you. Let me show you. There we go. So now what I've done is I've added a little bit of white. The reason I hadn't done any white in here is obviously because we're working in shadow, but white will also desaturate a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So I don't want to get too carried away with the white. I want to make sure that we still have that warmth. And despite this being like a lightening agent, a lot of white, especially titanium white, is pretty cool. Right? So you want to kind of like be a little bit sparing, especially in these middle spaces, or I would be. And so that way you can really reserve that hot, well, I guess that really cold, intense white or lighter areas and throughout here, and you have that really nice punch, right? So just a little bit of white, get us a little bit warmer.
And as you are mixing all of these paints in together, I want to bring it back to, this is the same experience that you would have with the other Liquitex heavy body paints that we have known and loved for years. Like, I think honestly this was one of the very first paints that I officially tried when I was younger.
Yeah.
In the acrylic realm, which is, we're not going to talk about how long ago that was. But it's one of those things that, like, I have used Liquitex, especially their heavy body paints, for such a long time. And watching you mix this, I am seeing absolutely no difference in how the paint is reacting, how it is moving on your brush, how you're applying it on the canvas. It is the same experience, and it is 50% recycled.
Exactly.
Well, bio-based.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
recycled,
bio-based.
you know,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean there are elements of recycling in that, right? And it's just so cool that, like, yeah, because Liquitex was one of the first companies, if not the first company, to offer like an actual commercial acrylic onto the market, right? That was in the 1950s. And so I kind of love about this is that they're really shifting into a space of like, okay, how do we take something that people really love, this product, and then shift into something that is a little more with the time, right?
Yeah.
That people are noticing, oh, you know what? I want a more sustainable practice. How do we do this? And this is just about listening, about research and development. And, you know, that number will keep on going up. This will continue to broaden. And I don't know, I'm really excited about it because it doesn't feel any different. That's the thing is like, I just get lost in it. Like, oh, delicious. How fun is paint?
And I think that's really the key, is having that really amazing experience with our paints, and to have that bonus of it's helping the environment is just the cherry on top. Because as artists, we are going to create no matter what. We have that drive, we have that feel inside of us that we're just like, we have to create something, and that yearning to do that. And so to have a really great option that is sustainable makes me so happy.
Me too. And I'm a vegetarian, and sometimes I receive things like, oh, it tastes just like a burger. And then you're like, that doesn't taste like a burger. And then sometimes you have something like, oh my gosh, that tastes like a burger. Right? And that's the experience that we're going for here, right? Like, this is like, ooh, yeah, this is like sustainable, and I don't even know, right? I don't have to think about it. I don't have to convince myself into it.
I love it. Although,
yeah, we are. Although what?
I was going to say, I'm not a vegetarian, but I do have those moments where, like, I've tried, like, the Impossible Burger and things like that, where I'm like,
you know what? Yeah.
I'm impressed.
And there's an argument for that. Because some people are like, I don't know if I need a more sustainable art practice. And it's like, listen, just try it out. Why not? It can't hurt. Get yourself like a tube or two, throw it in there and see if you notice. Because it might be a really exciting surprise. You're like, oh yeah, this is cool. And you might even just be like, I'm in it for the jars, right? Because
that would be me. Well, that entirely. I do love the sustainability of it. I cannot deny that part. But the jars are definitely unexpected. Like, I love the fact that they come in those little jars.
Me too, for all my little bim and bobs. Alright, stunning.
So happy.
So you'll notice we're now encouraging what's called that Terminator line, right? Now we can actually see the shift, which is really exciting. There she is.
I'm
gonna
just
gorge.
shift this over.
Thank you.
For everybody out there watching, it helps. Helps when you flip things around.
Exactly. And so I typically, just in terms of like the painting itself, because I'm not super concerned about quote unquote detail, right? We don't really see a lot of knuckle here. We don't see a lot of anything. So what we're really thinking about is the way that what's considered like the Langer lines. So the way that a form kind of pets over, or the rhythm of an actual form, right? So going in and allowing for my brush strokes and the way that I'm applying the paint to show the actual dimension. Exactly.
So you're going over that form. Yeah. That's definitely very, very helpful, especially when you're painting into that, going from the lighter value, I think, into that shadow realm.
Yes.
It kind of helps.
Now this is the moment I'm going to rinse out my brush, and here's why. Because I have a lot of black still in my brush. When I start adding in that white, it will start to gray, right? So when we're going warmer, and especially with temperature, we want to make sure that we keep the saturation and we keep that warmth. And because we have the coolness here, and the black and the blue, they share a common temperature. They share a common coolness, if you will, right? They're the cool kids. And then the warm kids like need a little bit more coddling, right? So we're washing out the brush. Exactly. And we don't have to even go too fresh, right? Like I'm still kind of like digging my heels in a little bit. I'm just making it so it's not like full on like loaded.
Yeah. And we have a off camera. There's an easy wiper rag. Cameron's just been just dabbing the brush off on, just to kind of get the excess water and things off on.
Absolutely.
And then it's still not a super clean brush because, like what you just did, you have paint on your fingers.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's
so,
that color relationship that still happens, but we can now be getting a little bit more into these warmer, brighter spaces.
Nice.
So I'm keeping my understanding of where my palette was. I'm going to introduce my red. And now I'm going to introduce a little bit of white.
Ooh.
That's so nice, right? We're still a
pink.
little like pinky, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a little bit of yellow.
Just to kind of pull it away from that blue, right?
Right. And I might even, before I go into here too much, I'm going to see if I can introduce the friends that we
Friends.
pre-mixed.
Paint friends.
Paint friends.
And what's great is that, and everybody's been wondering about like the dry time. And I mean, of course, dry time is always going to depend on your studio conditions, the temperature, the humidity levels. But here in North Carolina, as of today, in our studio, and it's been raining all week, it's pretty humid outside. So with that in mind, that very first puddle of paint that you mix right there, the blue-black, is still partially wet. Yeah. It's drying, and I can definitely tell that it is. And the layers of paint that you put down, it's a thin application. But the definite puddle of paint that you have mixed there, the areas that had the puddles kind of more condensed in like a thicker layer, that's not completely dry yet. And it's been 30 minutes since we started the show. Right. And you also had all this paint out before we started the show.
Exactly.
It wasn't like hours and hours, but like, you know, we put it out as soon as the show was going. And so these acrylics, it's not an instantaneous dry thing. I think it's funny when people are painting with acrylics and they're thinking that they have to rush so fast because it's acrylics and it dries. So it doesn't actually dry that fast. You do have quite a long time for workability.
Yeah, and I think that's why we started also with the heavy body, because the heavy body does have a slower dry time, right? And it's also just a little bit more versatile. I think for those of you who are like, oh, well, maybe I want to do soft body because I like a smoother application, right? Or something that's a little bit less impasto or thick. I would say try out the heavy bodies, and then you can always either thin it out with a medium or working in with a little bit with the water, right? Not adding too much water because it'll start to kind of break up the composition. However, a little bit of water never hurt anybody, right? You can get up to 10% and keep its stability. So you can have a pretty fluid application still with that.
Oh, for sure. And they are the heavy body, and because they do work with all of the other acrylics and acrylic mediums, if you wanted to pull that level of thickness down, you could add in your matte gels, or the other mediums that aren't bio-based also work with this just fine. So any of those, the more fluid viscosities of mediums that Liquitex already offers for their other paints, that you could very easily mix into these, pull that body down and kind of give it a little bit more of a fluid kind of feel. And it will kind of start making your colors a little bit more transparent. But again, these are so pigmented that to get to that soft body stage, you're not going to lose much of anything.
Exactly.
It's still such a lovely paint to work with.
And there is still some, even with my thinner applications of paint, you'll see that I'm still also doing some wet on wet color mixing in throughout here, right? So it's not like they're really heavy boundaries between the two, right? I'm feathering in, and they're allowing for themselves to mix. You can kind of see that from like here to here. This is a little brighter. We got into that previous layer, and we're getting just a little bit more cohesive with that previous layer, which is really beautiful. And so now you're really starting to see like a little shift happening, right? What's going on from here to here, here to here. It's kind of an exciting like, ooh, here's a punch going on, right? We're allowing for ourselves to see kind of the boundaries, how the form is happening, even though it's a really intense, it's called like a chiaroscuro, right? Yes. A major shift between a dark to a light.
I also just realized, I'll do this again. You're welcome. It's mostly for everybody watching, because I feel like, you know, artists, we are really good at like flipping the image up and down in our heads. Yes. But I know there's probably somebody in the chat screaming, "Can you just flip the image real quick?"
Wait, what's going on here?
It happens. But I love that very desaturated kind of, it reads very purpley.
Sorry, you want to flip with
fine.
me? And you
Yes.
flip with me? Gorgeous. We're going to do it so many times.
That's okay. I'm here to flip your image.
Oh, thank you.
Vanna White,
you're the best flipper.
Katie's chuckling over there. That's good. Although this does make me really want to paint. Oh, I love it.
Torture.
I know. But
Yeah, and so again, I guess like the folks at home is play around, think about also with something like this, how you're seeing your boundaries. So it's not necessarily about creating something that's fully formed in every application of the paint. You know, it's not necessarily like drawing in that way where you have kind of like a layer and you add another layer and you have your values that kind of continue to build up. This is a moment where we're really going in a painterly space of allowing for ourselves to trust the process of complicating our shadows, then reinstating our lights so it comes into an actual form.
love that. You have a question?
Yeah, can you remind us what colors you are using for the highlight portion?
Yes, absolutely. Emmy, do you mind reading over them just so I can remember?
Absolutely. We have titanium white.
Yep, got it.
I know you definitely have some of the quinacridone crimson in there.
For sure.
And then you had phthalocyanine blue.
Right, and we're not adding any more of this. This is from like inside of our brush already, right? So the
And
blues
this is
are
the green
done.
shade, mind you. There's a red shade and there's a
Right.
green shade. This leans a little bit more towards that kind of green side of the blues.
And I wanted to go for the green shade because we want to use it as a cooling agent, right, opposed to a warming agent.
Yes. And then, of course, we also have the yellow medium azo. Is it azo? Azo?
I'm going to name a cat
Awesome.
that.
And I believe those are the colors. Oh, and then, of course, Mars Black.
Yes.
So I think in the mixture that you currently have right now, don't you have a little bit of everything in there?
Yes, at this point we got everybody in the sauce,
Whole
right?
party.
Yeah, whole party, and we're really now just adding in our warmer tones. So we're sticking now here, right? Before we started here, and then we kind of went in here, and then we kept on going here, and then we're going all the way throughout here, right? So what that's doing is going boop, boop, not that one, boop, 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 boop.
Okay. So and I love that you can see that transition. So it started really dark and then you're kind of just shifting it slowly.
Exactly, and I'm really now just kind of taking a look and seeing if I have any like really sharp boundaries that then are in that terminator line, so I can just have something that feels a little bit more continuous in terms of the light, because I want to make sure
So
we
you're
know.
softening it.
Yeah, well, we know where, okay, this is a formal boundary, and then this is a value or a light boundary. So we're just going to like bounce on in here. This brush is also one of the freestyle brushes, which is like this brat green color, which I'm obsessed with.
It is a really fun color.
And it has a great like counterweight to it.
It does.
And it's really this like shockingly nice. You know, I saw this and
Shockingly
I was
nice.
kind of like, oh, okay, like Liquitex, this is
Well,
like a
it's-
little wild. And then I started
funny-
using it,
yeah.
I was like, oh, I love
The
this.
color
like, there's a
makes
method
you
to
go,
the madness.
huh? And then you hold it in your hand and you're like, oh, I get it. And it's one of those things that like, it's such a fun color that you don't think that it's going to have that like kind of serious painterly quality, but the bristles are so great on it. It has that snap back to it that I really, really look for in a brush, which it's bouncy and it goes back to its form really easy. Whereas like a Kolinsky sable, when you start painting with it, it kind of tends to hold whatever angle, like if you're brushing it, it's going to hold that angle where you were brushing it because it's so soft. Whereas like this has that snap where it's like you brush on it and then it goes right back to where it needs to be.
Exactly, and that's also because these are synthetic brushes, right? And I am a huge proponent of synthetic brushes, especially with acrylics, because it allows for the moisture to not be absorbed,
Yeah.
right? I think acrylics, I mean, all paints really rely on the balance of those three components, the vehicle, the binder, and the pigment, but I think acrylics really, there's something so special about how its chemistry works into the painting. And sometimes if you have a brush that absorbs too much moisture,
Yeah.
you'll start to see drying. You won't see kind of like what a line that's happening here. It's a little tricky to kind of figure out how much moisture is in the brush already,
Yes.
right? And it doesn't really matter. It's like, I think synthetic especially is really good at getting what you have here onto here, no fuss.
Yeah. And that's really, I think, when it comes to brushes, really finding what works for you as an artist. And I mean, because everybody works in such different ways, but not fighting your art supplies is massive. Once you get to that stage where you find the brush and the paints that work for you, and something that is, you know, in line with your sustainability needs and everything along those lines, it is just a wonderful experience. Did we have a question?
Yes. Is the dry time different from any other acrylics that you've worked with, or is it pretty similar?
I would say that it's the same as the heavy body. Yeah, so I wish I want to make that more complicated.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just it's the same as the heavy body.
Yeah, the Liquitex heavy body that has already been around for so long. The same thing, which makes me so happy.
Me too. I know, because really like what you were talking about, Emmy, of like, oh, this is like, you know, it's sustainable, it's this. I think there's a lot of greenwashing that happens in a lot of different companies. And even when I was kind of like offered this demo opportunity and they were like, okay, try this out, I was a little skeptical. I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe
Always
not.
skeptical until we get our hands on the product.
And then you're like, oh wait, like this is one, it works exactly the same.
Yes.
It's really nice to work with. The heavy body is delicious. And I love the packaging. And I love that it can be compatible with any other acrylic.
That is, I think, it's really, really important for me. Because if I have a paint that I have to buy the entire line because it doesn't play nice with others, that's infuriating. And like, I want all my acrylic paints to play with all my other acrylic paints, and they should. And so to have that is really wonderful, because then I can grab what I already have, grab a couple of colors that I'm like, ooh, I really love those colors, and I really want to try those, or I need to replace my quinacridone crimson, and, you know, I might as well grab this, and then it works just perfectly with it.
Exactly. And like, for example, if we take the quinacridone crimson from here to here,
We can actually hear.
Ooh. Yeah, so this is the typical heavy body,
You
right?
want to actually grab me that tube? Here.
Yeah.
Here's the straightforward
Absolutely.
heavy body acrylic, right?
And then
Here, I can grab another brush.
Scroll.
I usually
Yeah,
have. I take it back, but I do have a palette knife.
I have one too.
Oh yeah, grab a palette knife. So we can do the same thing.
Right, and so I mean, really the difference is that this comes in a package of the tube.
Yeah.
And this comes in the jar, which is fabulous. And when you mix them together too, it's really important to know there is no shift in either one.
It's the same texture, it's the same color, it's the same feel, and it's still just a beautiful.
Thank you
There
so
you go.
much. Yeah.
It's still just such a beautiful experience as far as painting wise. So.
Cool. And we're in a good shift. So right now we can see. So I what I'm going to do is there's some in throughout here. There's some little kind of boundary moments. I'm going to go in.
Sound effects are required.
They're necessary and mandatory.
Yes, absolutely. In case anybody was wondering.
Yep. You have to sign a clause every time you buy a bio-based acrylic that you're going to use sound effects.
Promise to use sound effects whilst painting. Although, I gotta ask everybody out there watching, what is your favorite sound effect while painting?
I can't wait for people to try to spell
I want them to try and figure out how to spell it. This is the thing that brings me joy. And there is a spelling for every sound effect. Absolutely. Ooh, I love this like shift that you're getting. That makes me so happy.
Right, and so I think it's important to know too is that we have there's a bias in how we perceive everything, right? And especially when it comes to color. And I think sometimes when we get very caught up in this idea of like, oh, this is the local color of an apple, or this is like the color of skin. And it's really important to know that like we see color because everything bounces off of everything else. We're able to have like a moment where you can then look at like a really intense violet. Like if you just look here and I told you that was for like my skin tone, you're good to go, right? And they would be like, I don't know. But then you see it here in context, and it offers something that's a little bit more complicated and nuanced. And so that way, especially when you take your own reference, despite whatever your hand looks like, you're allowed to then think about, oh, this works for me, right? And you're going to think about, okay, when I have my mid-tone, right, that space in between, how are you going to show whether you have deeper skin, lighter skin, whatever else? You can shift it based off of these concepts here.
I love it.
Which is the best.
Which is funny because anybody who's seen me paint, mine would look like a fever dream compared to yours. I always have really insanely punchy colors, and like the vibrancy is usually turned way up. And it's always so satisfying for me to watch somebody who paints in such a desaturated way, because it is so beautiful, and it's one of those things that my brain's like, oh yeah, that's an option. But it's so successful when you see that intentionally done, and it makes me so happy.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you can also see too, like even with like a painting that's relatively similar, right? You can see that I went a little warmer in my spaces here, but I'm kind of leaning into the violets. Like those are, I'm just so excited.
So to say, you have like quite a lot more of that red, and here, let me make sure that's on camera. The reds and the yellows kind of did show quite a lot more in that like that middle value.
And that is also because we're missing this last step, which is the really intense cool light here that will warm up what's happening here. So yes, we're definitely cooler in here, but once we add in that like final, I might even just do it now. We don't have to. You don't have to futz too much. Here, let's go in.
Because it's definitely one of those things that everything in painting is relative.
Exactly.
Absolutely relative.
Yeah.
So as soon as you pop in those highlights, you're like, oh, that's a mid-tone, not a light highlight. Even though right now it looks like a highlight. But pop in that lighter value and you're like, oh. This is that part where Amanda is like, just that one brush stroke, and it's just magic. And
it's so true. And I think like really it's important for you to know that I feel that way too. Like I think that like really practiced people, sometimes it seems like, oh, they make it seem so easy, whatever else. There is always kind of that stress moment where you're like, especially when you're on camera, and then you're like, oh, you know what? I hope this turns out the way that I wanted it to turn out. And then you're kind of painting it and you're like pretending and you're smiling and you're like, yes, this is going to happen. And then there's the moment here where it kind of does come together. So I would just say like really trust, one, keep your palette organized so that way you know if there's like kind of a funky color in there, you know where it happened. Right? You can go back once maybe you've allowed for your full spectrum to go through and say, ooh, you know what? There's kind of like a weird green situation in here. Go back over it, do a little dry brushing. It's like it never happened. And it might even help the painting, right?
Contrast.
Exactly.
But
and I
do love acrylics for that reason, that you can just go back in and layer on it. Especially when you start mixing in the mediums and it gets that transparency. And then you can just very easily pull a glaze on top of something and it would just shift it back to where it needed to be, and all of a sudden it's magical again.
Right.
And I feel like we've gotten some spellings for some really wonderful.
Depending on Facebook, just type in ARG, and I thought he was mad, and then I remembered what you asked me to do.
That's like, so funny.
Yes! I love it. Painting while being a pirate. It's very piratey, and I'm here for it. That makes me so happy. Especially because it took Amanda a second to realize that it was not anger.
I was like, what did we do?
It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
No.
Oh man, but I love that.
Right, so we can really start to see now where we have that major shift. And what's also nice is that this doesn't necessarily mean that it looks like purple skin, right? What this means is that maybe it's in a cooler lighting situation, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
So it feels almost kind of like, oh, I don't know, like a little stroby, like it feels kind of like Berlin nightclub, like it's feeling like a little bit, you know, a little moment in throughout there. It feels a little ghostly.
We are going into spooky season, so
that's right.
It
or
could be a
Berlin
ghosty.
nightclub season.
Also valid.
However you feel.
I am here for all of it. Oh, man.
And so what I'm really paying attention to in these is it can sometimes look like you're just outlining, and because it's fun, I think sometimes our brains turn off and we're like, oh, love how fun this is, and then every one of these highlights start to look the same. So what I would say is pay attention that even though maybe they are going to be consistent lines or forms, think about where those lights get really heavy, right? Where those details, quote unquote details, can happen just based on how thick your lights are or how far up the hand or the fingers they go, right? So for example, like if we're going here onto the ring finger, we could even push a little bit further into the pad of that finger and then allow for that to go in. And what that does is it gives this form with like 2 seconds of a stroke, right? So I think a lot of times, like the less working, the more it kind of actually feel like the form, and opposed to like something where it's like, oh, I just have to make this look like the thing. It can feel a little bit forced, if you will, right? The paint can do a lot more for you than sometimes we think they can, or it can.
I feel like you're painting more with like that feeling here, whereas like you're not trying to replicate exactly what's from the photo.
Exactly.
That feel, that intention kind of behind it.
Yeah, and especially because we're kind of in like a time, we're timed here, we have an hour. I think it's nice to know that like this can be your base, and then you can look back, and especially with acrylics, which is fabulous, even 5 minutes later you get a snack, you're feeling better, you're ready to go again, you're in the marathon, then you can see, okay, where do I want to go with this? Do I want it to be more detailed? Do I want to add in some of the hairs that are existing here? Maybe I want to go in and get a little bit more of that nuance that are happening in the pads, or the textures of the skin, or what's going on in throughout here, right? But it's really exciting to know that you can have a really solid base and platform here that then you can go in any direction, or it could be done.
Oh, for sure. That is beauty of acrylics. Do we have a question?
Yes. How is the feeling painting on that canvas? In particular, does it feel anything like stretched linen, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, I would say stretched linen, it's just going to be a finer weave. So with this canvas, we're working in with just like a thicker, more textured weave. So
actually, I wonder if we can go to that side camera.
Yeah.
Because then I can really show off the texture of this canvas here. Because if I
there it is.
Do this, you guys can really see that texture that comes through. Because if I start pulling it into shadow, the texture really starts coming out. It's a really lovely texture.
Yeah.
But it is cotton, not linen. So that is one thing to note.
And it's also with plastic fibers, and it's gessoed, it's pre-gessoed, right? So if you want something a little bit finer or smoother, you can always gesso again, and then sand.
Did I say it was cotton? My goodness. I think I said it was cotton. It's not cotton, I'm sorry, it's plastic bottles.
But it feels like cotton. So again, it's the same experience.
It feels exactly like cotton. And this is where my brain's like, oh, that's cotton. Yeah, no, it's plastic bottles, but it's obviously so similar that my brain just turned off and said that it was cotton. Do you have a question?
Yeah, if you did decide to add the hair to the hand, Sherry is wondering how you would do it with this type of paint, and if you would switch brushes.
You know, I think it depends on how you want to work with the actual feeling of hair, right? I think a lot of times we get very caught up in if there is something that's considered like a tertiary detail, right? Which is like very, very on the surface, something that's very fine. I think especially with the advent of photography, we think about those details as being so small and you can really get in there. But when you look back at painting globally, right, you can see that textures are accomplished sometimes through something that's much more gestural. Maybe it's wet on wet, right? That you then go in and you're using the paints that you have on your palette, you go in and just kind of, maybe with a smaller brush, or maybe even with your flathead brush, just working with the side. Yeah, let's go there, right? Because you have
Katie.
the broad.
Yeah, sorry, can we get to that top? Want to make sure that you can see this.
No worries. So you got the broad here, but this is a really versatile tool because now you have a really thin brush, right? And if you did want to go in and kind of even squeeze the base, it gets even thinner.
Yeah.
So if you did want something that just has a little bit more of a wisp, I would suggest one, going in maybe more with the movement of hair. But if you did want to go like really, really intense in terms of like how thin those little marks are, you could definitely go in with a smaller brush. You could go in with squeezing this brush, go on in and having just kind of some really fine, even some like practice strokes, because you can go in with this. I would add a little
You can get
bit.
really fine with a flat brush. That's
Right.
probably one of my favorite things to do.
I
That's why I end up getting very married to a brush, because I use the side of it really finely. And you can get some really fine little details. Like,
Yeah, I don't even know if you can
I don't
see
even
that.
know if they can see that.
I don't know if you can see that.
I can do this though. Excuse the glare, but it's right.
She's here.
Yeah, that is a single stroke with just the side of that brush.
Yeah, and if you wanted a liner brush, you could do that too. But I would say, like, work with the brushes that you have and practice and see what kind of hair texture you enjoy, right?
Yeah.
And what works with the way that you have applied your paint.
And if you do want to get really, really fine and detailed with it, we absolutely have some really tiny little detail brushes available. Do we have a question?
Yeah. Have you noticed at all if the canvas gets any more brittle with time?
It does not. No, so it undergoes the same testing that all the other, all the other surfaces, but all the other acrylics in general go through, right? I cannot remember the name of the process right now because I am not a chemist. But
It is a big machine that does things.
Exactly, and it's like it beams it with like the intensity of light that would be like the equivalent of leaving something in the sun for like 10 years,
yes.
20 years, 30 years.
There's,
so that's
there's
how.
a name for it, but that name.
And it sounds
It's a
fake.
name.
It sounds like it's like the Rex Sun
Yeah, I don't know.
Xenon 3000 or
It
something.
goes pew pew.
Exactly.
And it zaps it.
So it undergoes the same testing, so it's not sacrificing any of the quality, and it has to go and succeed in the same testing as all the other products. So if you are very comfortable with how your canvases from Liquitex have bared in the past, this will be no different for you.
Sure. They do a lot of testing before it hits the market, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I do love that.
One of my favorite things is talking to Johnny, who's one of the chemists at Liquitex, and he just nerds out, and I don't really understand most of what he's saying, but I'm just so excited that it's like his own art form.
I love it. That makes me so happy. Do we have another question over on the YouTube side? No? I thought you were. Sorry. Never mind. But if you guys, again, just a quick reminder, if you guys do have any questions, because I know we are getting close to the end of our show here, if you are watching this in the future or anything along those lines, and you have a question and you really want that answered, set it in the comments, and we will always go back and check them. We can always answer them for you guys that way. So, I love it. The amount of light that's hitting this is just so fun. And it is popping off that canvas so well.
And really what I'm doing now is like, now that this is dried, I'm just kind of going in, and you can, I don't know if you can hear it.
Scrub it just a little bit.
Yeah. And it's just like a nice little dry, and I think there's something nice. Linen's wonderful, but I think what's nice about like these canvases and your typical surface from Liquitex especially is that you want a little bit of grit, right? Because you want to be able to kind of push your paint around and have a little bit of a drag. So if you want to have a really thin, beautiful line, crisp line, you can, but if you want to have something a little softer where you can see into your different layers, this allows for that to happen opposed to a really perfectly smooth surface.
And that was very ASMR. Do love that. Now, I know we are getting really, really close to the end of this show, but I did want to just remind everybody to make sure you hit that thumbs up button as well. Show Cameron some love. It was so amazing to watch you guys, or watch you paint for us. And I know you guys are really interested in this Liquitex bio-based acrylic paints that we got going on. So again, if you do have any questions, let us know. I'm obsessed with this paint. It is so fun. So fun.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for joining. This has been such a blast. Thank you for painting with me. Yeah, please do.
I just want to like.
And there it
that
is.
Pop out. That's
right.
the playing with that matte medium for the background. That side is the exact same color, and just a change in the surface of the paint.
Yeah, you got your matte
so
medium
fun.
in here, and it really just gives it. And when you're walking past a painting too, and you see like a surprise.
So I was like, I know I'm seeing the sheen change, and I was just wanting to make sure that everybody could see it too, because it's so stunning. Yes, do you have a question?
How is the cleanup?
That's a great question.
Great question. Cleanup is exactly the same. What I would
can actually
say,
do it now.
especially, is it's a water base, right? So we got this here.
Now that is actually the other acrylic. This is
so
the original.
It's going to wash exactly the same. So the theme of the day is exactly the same, right? So allowing for yourself, and especially if you're like cleaning up a palette and you have a lot of paint on your palette, what I typically do is I actually have a rag that I have just for cleaning that I will just kind of scoop up. Socks that have holes in them are great for this, right?
Old t-shirts.
Yeah, because you're not going to use it again. You're going to throw it out. So you might as well just use it for something else. And then it gets really crunchy. And that way then when it becomes a solid, you can throw it out. So it's not going into the water or anything like that, which is really great.
Yeah.
You know, and especially for something like this, let it dry on here. And then you just scrape that off with some sort of scraper or
This is
a razor blade.
the New York Central glass palette.
Yeah.
So it's a reusable palette that you guys can absolutely have as well.
Yeah.
To kind of
toss it out, you're ready to go. And if you have stuff like this, nice about the packaging is you could scoop it right back in there.
Yeah, before your paint dries.
Yes.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Now I have actually seen people take their old acrylic paints and just keep them, and then they actually sculpt with them.
Absolutely.
As well, because this is almost like a plastic once it dries. So I've seen people do some really fun things with that.
Yeah, and acrylics merge to acrylics even when dry.
They do.
So you can kind of go
They
in
want
there
to
and
stick.
squeeze them on, and you're good to go.
I've even had I used like a piping bag and piped my
Like
acrylic
frosting?
out. Yes, let it dry, and then I did a painting, and then just kind of squished them in.
That's awesome.
To the wet paint, so it was dried. Little, I always call them paint poops because they're like little like it's like the poop emoji. So like you just squish them right back in. But
love that.
Yes, just another way of using your reusable palettes and your acrylics, which is really fun. All right, so I believe that was the show. Thank you again for being on the show. It was so much fun to have you here.
Yeah, this is the best.
And
Thank you all.
again, you guys, it's so stunning.
Oof,
That
look at that glare.
sheen, that sheen shift. Ah, so good. So that was the show. Again, if you guys are interested in any of the products that we were showing you on today's episode, make sure to go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code, JL352. Type it in the search bar. The teacher's card should come up, and you can check it out that way. And if you guys get a chance to play with any of these Liquitex bio-based heavy body acrylics, please tag us as well. Anything on any social media, the Jerry's Artarama channel. We would absolutely love to see what you guys are creating.
Absolutely, and we'd love to see you on the Liquitex site as well. So Liquitex Instagram, send them to me too on my Instagram. I'd love to see it as well. I want to see your hands.
All right, and then of course, make sure you join me next week because I'll be back and we're going to be painting with gouache, and we're going to be painting a really colorful forest, which is going to be really fun. I'm very excited. Now, the funny part of the show, where you all understand how short I am. I'm standing on a box. I'm just going to get the box out of the way.
It's movie magic.
Surprise! Cameron's really tall. All right, so that was the show, guys. We will see you guys next week. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Going that way.